Hi, everybody. Welcome to our online talk on syntheticspace.de, Staatliche Kunsthalle Baden-Baden's web extension of Jan St. Werner's solo exhibition, which unfortunately closes today. It's a pity. My name is Dominik Busch. I'm the Kunsthalle's digital curator, and I have the honor of moderating today's talk. Space Synthesis opened on May 5th. It's the first solo exhibition of artist and composer Jan St. Werner, who has accompanied the Kunsthalle's program since 2021 as a resident artist, or as we call him, our Hauskünstler, one of several. He realized several projects on site and in the city of Baden-Baden. And with the Space Synthesis exhibition, Werner transforms the Kunsthalle into a sound space using the building as a very large instrument. The works composed for the exhibition explore human thought about sound in dialogue with the institution's architecture. Werner's work adheres to the concept that everyone perceives sounds differently, and the Kunsthalle becomes a living body of work in which art and architecture merge in a transdisciplinary way. Sound is usually understood as a medium of representation, a portrayal of interpretation of a source. In Space Synthesis, however, sound is a method of exploration, and the Kunsthalle is its subject. Supported by light, movements, distractions, and interventions, the parcours through the exhibition is created in which each room represents a separate section of a composition that is altered by the movements of each individual visitor. Space Synthesis conceives of space not as a static object, but as a multiplicity of perspectives that are intertwined and react to each other. The careful use of light creates an immaterial architecture that intervenes in the space, but can also dynamically change itself. Thus, the space is constantly in motion, in dialogue with the visitors. By intervening in the structural design of the Kunsthalle, resonances are created that make the building speak. Sounds blend and combine. Each frequency in the space creates new frequencies. Each echo generates new echoes, depending on where in the space the listener is located. Architectural elements are positioned at certain points that have a diffusing effect and divide the space in an invisible but audible way. And this is where our digital sphere comes into play. As an extension and as an artistic intervention at once, syntheticspace.de makes visible what the eye cannot see. Today, we will talk about the origins of this website and the ideas that informed it, about performing bodies as performing data, on the dramaturgy of the emerging space and the capacities of real-time feedback with the audience and the institutional framework this provides. I'm extremely honored to host this panel and warmly welcome Jan St. Werner, of course, and the director of the Staatliche Kunsthalle Baden-Baden, Charla Ilk, our collaborators Nikola Bojić and Damir Gamulin, as well as Goran Sergej Pristas and Linz Derry. I'll introduce the speakers individually, but I'd like to first give a brief introduction to today's event and its structure. So today's talk will roughly be structured into two sections. First, Nikola Bojić, Jan St. Werner, and Charla Ilk will talk about, quotation marks, the synthetic space and the reconceptualized exhibition space through Jan's granular sound synthesis and new modes of depth sensing. The leading question herein is, what new rebellious spatial typology can emerge from here, especially in an era of synthetic media? In the second part, Damir Gamulin, Linz Derry, and Sergej Pristas will discuss the role of choreography, performing bodies as performing data, the dramaturgy of the emerging space, and the capacities of real-time feedback with the audience. This will hopefully then lead into a broader discussion, bringing together these elements and all the exhibition's layers together. The audience, you are very much welcome, of course, to ask questions at any time. Please use our YouTube chat. We will find time to answer them, hopefully, at the end of our discussion. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first three panelists. And of course, starting with the artist himself, Jan St. Werner is a Berlin-based electronic music artist and composer. Widely known as one half of the electronic music group Mouse on Mars, Werner always seeks a dialogue with the visual arts in his sound works. Understanding, as he himself puts it, sound as something that is constantly in motion and cannot be grasped from a fixed perspective, Werner defies traditional tuning systems and instead centers his works on bringing together variable elements. Werner has realized sound interventions in exhibitions in art spaces such as the ICA London, Documenta 14 in Athens and Kassel, Kunsthalle Düsseldorf, Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin. In 2021 and 2022, his spatial sound exhibitions were presented at the Kunstbau Lenbachhaus in Munich, during the CTM Festival in Berlin, and at the Germanisches Nationalmuseum in Nuremberg, as well as in the 6th Ural Biennial. The project, Sometimes You Just Have to Give It Your Attention, initiated by him and Michael Ackstaller, who's also a collaborator on this exhibition, deals with the history and present of the Nazi party rally grounds in Nuremberg. From 2017 to 2021, Werner was professor of interactive media, dynamic acoustic research at Nuremberg Academy of Fine Arts, the first class of its kind at a German art academy. Previously, he taught at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the infamous MIT in Boston, and at the New York University Tisch School of the Arts in Berlin. In 2020 and 2021, he was also a visiting professor of sound and performance at the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich. Chala Ilk is a curator and architect. Since 2020, she's been director of the Staatliche Kunsthalle Baden-Baden, together with Misal Adnan Yildiz. She works transdisciplinarily in theory and practice between visual art, architecture, sound, theater, and performance. She uses dramaturgy as a method of curating and integrates transdisciplinary approaches into her curatorial work. Her exhibition methodology follows the idea of working with events and installations that change and make transitions visible instead of static forms of exhibition making. Ilk was born in Istanbul, Turkey, and studied architecture at the Technical University of Berlin and the Mimar Sinan University in Istanbul. She has curated numerous exhibitions, most recently serving as a co-curator for the 6th Ural Biennial in Yekaterinburg in 2021, and chief curator of Studio Bosporus, the German Foreign Office's nationwide interdisciplinary festival, as well in 2021. From 2012 to 2020, Ilk was dramaturg and curator at the Maxim Gorky Theater, where she was responsible for cross-disciplinary projects and festivals that combine performing, performative, and visual arts, often in a transcultural context. As a researcher, she worked on the research project Baukultur in der multiethnischen Stadt at the University of Siegen. In terms of cultural policy, she was active as a member of the Präsidium of the Neue Gesellschaft der Bildenden Kunst, NGBK, in Berlin, as a member of the Council for the Arts Berlin, and on numerous juries and cultural fundings. Most recently, Ilk was appointed creator of the German Pavilion at the Venice Biennial in 2024. And Nikola Bojić is a designer, researcher, and educator exploring relations between space, technology, and futures. His projects have been shown internationally, including the Triennale di Milano, the Venice Biennial, the Taipei Biennal, and Moderna Museet in Stockholm, and ZKM in Karlsruhe. He was a visiting lecturer at ACT, MIT, where he co-taught an advanced studio on the politics of techno-scientific modeling. Bojić published the artist book The Excavations and edited an issue of The Life of Art magazine on experimental cartographies. He teaches at the Academy of Fine Art in Zagreb, where he initiated the collaborative curatorial platform Remote Lab. He's an affiliate researcher at MIT and holds a master's degree in art history and information sciences from the University of Zagreb and a postgraduate master's degree in design studies from the Graduate School of Design of Harvard University. Thank you all for being here. It's an immense pleasure to welcome you all, and I'm handing over to Nikola with a reflection on syntheticspace.de.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for a great introduction and for organizing this event, which is like a peak and a final point in the long conversation and performative, let's say, discussions that we had and still have. So I will give you a brief background of the project. A project that is currently in Kunsthalle Baden-Baden, but that started, and I'm talking about our collaboration with Jan, that started actually in Zagreb about a year ago, or a bit more than a year ago. We organized together with Multimedia Institute in Zagreb, MAMA, famous MAMA, workshop with very heterogeneous, eclectic group of artists, researchers, scientists, composers, with a workshop with Jan and Michael Augsteller, which resulted with very interesting performance, ad hoc performance at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Zagreb. And that was an interesting moment for everyone, actually, including for Jan, I guess, because the museum, huge building of the Museum of Contemporary Art, it's a huge concrete building, new building, was empty, literally empty, because currently there is no permanent collection. So there is only a concrete, massive concrete walls. And in that setup where nothingness is being exposed, literally, there was nothing. Jan, with performers, participants of his and Michael's workshop, entered and intervened with these portable speakers. And actually, journey somehow started, our collaboration started there, because in the movement of sound, and this is synthetic granular type of sound, I'm sure that Jan will maybe explain more what granular sound means, really made the whole group of performance, Jan himself, me, but also ad hoc audience that was in the museum, to really rethink what the space is, what is human body in this space, while being immersed in this visually empty but thick, sensual, new sonic environment. And this actually ad hoc but very inspiring moment that happened about a year ago was used as really a base for developing further conversation, and it ended up with another bold statement, which was not ad hoc, but very well prepared and very well curated and organized by Kunsthalle Baden-Baden. And this is bold statement in institutional and also in curatorial terms, to have a whole historic building. This is early 20th century building in Baden-Baden, the main museum space, absolutely empty, filled only with sound. Or which type of sound we'll hear more later on for sure. But this echoes and redefining of human body identities, and this this notion of hybridity that happens between human bodies that reflect sound, human bodies that reflect sound between each other and between architecture, the movement, this irregularity, this actually mess that happens, and it unfolds who we are and how we behave and how we, and what can we see and really feel in this new space, made us really think space is what hegemonies or dominant narratives of architecture can be, or how they can be unfolded, cracked, crack open, if you like, in what means and by what means, and what human body can bring in this new space. This also open up the question of knowledge production, how knowledge is being produced through movement, through materiality of sound, through materiality of human body, is this space, which is in visual architectural terms very traditional space, very tectonic, but while being exposed or immersed in sound, in granular synthetic sound, it becomes really something else. It turns into something else. But there was also limitation, and this limitation is also physical limitation of architecture. It is new space, but it's still bounded with architectural constraints. You know, And then Damir Gamulin, Gamba, and myself again reappeared in conversation. Jan and Chala and Dominic invited us to think, to try to imagine the processes that actually we cannot see but feel in the museum. Because we all felt that we need another layer that will allow us to dig deeper in what's going on, really going on there. Beyond visceral knowledge, sensual knowledge that's being created, can we create another, not value, because it's not about creating another value in cultural terms, it's really about creating a new spatial layer of and maybe designing or practicing space and movement and sound. So of course we shifted towards digital realm. In digital realm, what granular sound is in physical realm, in digital realm, it became granular data or data point cloud that was created through depth sensors. So if sound functions in reflections and echoes in a museum space, Kunsthalle, in digital realm, it becomes dispersed cloud, data cloud, produced by depth sensors. It's not data visualization. It's a 3D model. It's not a rendering. It's not, synthetic AI thing. It's a real-time data, spatial data that is being, in very choreographed way, transmitted from museum, from gallery space to the digital realm. Gamba Damir will say more about it, and I think it's nice entry point to maybe to have further discussion. But in the end, what I would like to point out that this digital space is actually space in constant flux. It's a space of heterogeneous temporality. It's a space where distribution of the sensible or hegemonic way of distribution of the sensible really loses ground. We're not talking about that is being recorded and stored in a base or in some database. We are talking about debased data, debased spatial data picked from sensors and transmitted online in real time. Now, instead of, let's say, find a nicely ordered database that can be managed later, we are talking about radical poetics of overabundance. We're talking about terabytes of data that just leaked, of terabytes of data without any productive capacity. And the final thought is definitely the political capacity of this new space, a political capacity to rethink what synthetic means in the era of synthetic media, where database or big data is the value, and from which data can be trained and create new AI models. Can we really imagine resistance or new modes of synthesizing space, new spatial typologies through materiality of human body, through materiality of existing architecture, but brought up in new relations and mediated through sound? So this is just a basic layout, and I would like to give word to Jan, Chala, and then everyone else. Thank you.
Dominic, shall I immediately take over? Or?
We had just the idea of instead leaving this kind of this, I mean, there's visual elements, of course, to the exhibition. There's something to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we came up with a rather spontaneous idea of showing the exhibition movie that has been done for the exhibition by filmmaker Joseph Cardo. This is a video lasting about 10 minutes, but maybe we can get an impression by just showing a few minutes of it. Would you guys agree? Okay, then let me try to get it going. No?
Maybe in the meantime, I can mention that you can find the video on the Kunsthalle Baden-Baden website as well. There's no audio on my screen. So maybe the audio of the player isn't routed to your output. Maybe I can dub the video in real time. I can explain what you hear. It's basically two speakers, which are custom built. Michael Ackstaller who is essential to the construction and conceptualization of the exhibition, is building different types of speakers which use the principle of wave field synthesis. So smaller membranes of loudspeakers contribute elements to, let's say, a larger picture, which is then constructed in space. We adopted this principle. We do not exactly follow the idea of space of wave field synthesis, but we're creating very distinct beams with those loudspeakers. So you have a very focused, quite energetic, which doesn't mean loud, but the waveform lasts for a very long distance, and we create these beams and basically send sound through a series of rooms of the Kunsthalle. And the principle was to create like a vortex, a movement throughout the whole museum. So you imagine a rather large hall. When you enter the museum space, you turn to your right, and then there is a sequence of 3 rooms. At the end of those 3 rooms, you turn to your left, you enter another rather large space. Again, you exit that space, and through a sequence of another 3 rooms, you return to the main hall. So we created 2 beams, basically from the main hall through the first series of 3 rooms. Then you enter at the very back the space that you're seeing right now, which has basically, I wouldn't say a hole, but the glass ceiling, you can see it here, has been interrupted, and 2 light beams, which are constantly moving, they're motorized, overlap each other and create, you could say, like a phasing image of an image that's like, it's like a square image, but from an indirect angle. And then you enter this space we're seeing right now, which has 3 smaller speakers. They also have very direct beams, but they use different directions. So they really basically shoot the sounds into disparate directions. I have to explain the idea of these beams is they bounce off walls. They are being reflected by the architecture of, in this case, in the museum or anything. You hold them towards you. And the beams come back. So you can have actually several reflections created with one of those speaker panels. Depends on the distance, obviously. So you can, we refer to it as like a mirror cabinet, or you would imagine like, you know, a laser show that is reflected by small mirrors. You can do similar things with sound. So as much as you're interested in what are the speakers actually playing, or what is the actual sound, and I'll explain that a little later. This is really also about the spatial responses. This is really about like how does this space talk back to you, and also how do we construct space. But I'll elaborate a little more further. So the ceiling, you see, there's like these glass elements, and above those glass elements are again light beams which are motorized. We motorized them. Matthias Singer, who constructed the light concept for the show, Michael Acksteller, and me came up with the idea that you could have these lights moving as if, and you can have them move at different speeds, because the light is indirect. It sometimes looks like the sun would run very fast. Sometimes the feeling really slows down. We also motorized the blinders, so you can really close the museum ceilings with blinders, jalousie, and those are motorized, so we can also play with closing these. Here you see one of those panels, speaker panels. And they create these very distinct beams. There are architectural interventions. You see one here. So there's no corner in that particular room, or one of the corners is basically another, you could say, wall element, which seems to peel off the wall. And behind this element, new resonances are created. So the shadow that visually is like creates the character of this intervention. The shadow also holds sonic artifacts. So that element is, as much as it is a visual deconstruction of the museum space, also an acoustic element of absorption and resonance. We have a couple of those interventions, very subtle, one very dominant, actually, in the very first room, when you, like after you entered the big museum hall, the first room, when you turn to the right, it nearly looks like the ceiling would come down and really cuts into the space. It's a very strong visual statement, but it is also a diffuser. So the sound beam that enters that space is immediately being divided. I'm not sure if we are still going to see that room, or if we already saw it and I basically skipped it, but you can imagine. So there's a close-up to these of these membranes. Just to explain, they all beam the exact same signal, but they're synced so that it creates one very strong and very distinct sound signal. So you don't have several sounds. Each membrane like presents another sound. It's really one sound being sent with that panel. The floor of the last room of the sequence of spaces has a ceiling, a floor that is going upward and bending down again. So by walking slightly, it's very subtle, but by walking slightly upward, you also change the resonances of the sounds that are in the space. So by changing your body position, or you're also filtering, and you're also actively participating in how the piece is being composed or performed. In the main hall, which I just mentioned, there's an element that you see here. It's a wall that is basically very slowly moving through the space, and it's moving towards the entrance, like the doorway. There are no doors in the doorways, they're all open. Just to explain, the speakers were built so they resemble doors, as if you would have removed the door from the doorway and move it into the space, and that door would beam sound back into the space. So this element that you just saw is just a wall, it's not a speaker, and that wall acts like a filter. I think this briefly explains the exhibition. The idea was really to create a momentum, a vortex throughout the museum space. And I'm right in my my statement or my manifesto about like space construction from, let's say, an auditory perspective. And I say auditory because I don't like intentionally want to use the term sonic or sound, because the auditory includes the psychological or the cognitive aspect of how we construct perception and how we construct experience. And the auditory is an interesting field because we deal with a lot of flaws and incomplete packets of information, and we render them consistent. That is what the cognitive process does in sound. Very often we do it also in visual, in the visual field, but in sound there are lots of glitches and unsolved issues which the mind basically just decides for us. For better or worse, we can improve these decisions, we can actually question them. It's sometimes hard work. It can take a long time, but we can really change our habits and behavior. So sound is the example that we're using to offer a different construction of the institutional space, the social space, and the perceptual space that this museum is. And because it is a museum, it is a great space to work in, because it's meant to be empty and carry or be a vessel, being a volume for artistic suggestions. And our suggestion was, that the sound is not replacing the artwork, but the sound is actually encouraging the visitors to really contribute in the construction of the actual artwork. So the artwork is how we construct the space, how we perceive the sound interventions, how we deal with the visual cues we get, also the objects that are obviously present, if they are the speakers or these architectural elements or the moving wall, the seats we created, you know, they're mobile chairs, for seats for one person, which move throughout the exhibition. So all the thing that is, you could say, material or could be objectified, how we deal with this. And the synthesis idea is basically how all these elements interact, relate to each other. And yeah, I don't want to drift off like too much about this, but the claim of the show is that all the parameters we have for the construction of our perceptual idea of the world, and how we communicate it with others and how we act accordingly, the actions we that as a consequence, whether they are artistic or activities of necessity, wherever, like that these things are negotiable. And this negotiation led us to open a parallel field, which is the digital space. And the digital space is per se a space of negotiation and dialogue. So it is, according to the parameters that we use to define the museum space, it is a space. It is a space of call, response, thesis, anti-thesis, question and answer. So we thought the digital space should be something that should be part of our consideration. And so with Gamba and Nikola, we found two allies to think and construct this different map, this different navigation, this different grasping or formulation of actually the cognitive space. That is basically the main concern of that exhibition. So yeah, I think it's gives a little introduction in the actual exhibition and how the link into the construction of the digital space came about.
Maybe here I can connect to with the curatorial idea behind the whole concept. It started also with it's actually, maybe I should tell about, we are now in the first ground floor of our institution, and upstairs is the exhibition space, which maybe you don't hear, but we are already in the exhibition, of, even though we're in the ground floor, because we hear the sound of the exhibition. So the composition is every day from 10 to 6 present during our working hours. So in the last 2 months, when we were working in our working spaces, we were a part of the, we were already a part as an audience in our own exhibition. I think it's very interesting also to understand how the sound moves. So we were thinking, okay, we're doing the exhibition in the exhibition hall, but exactly, literally, the building became a part and played also a part. It was the idea bringing also the exhibition and the architecture of the exhibition space becoming more taking part as a protagonist in the exhibition. So how we define the space and how to move in the space. And I think these were also the questions, the presence of the moving sound, the presence of the moving audience, or even not, we are not the moving audience, but we still experience. So I think this coming together in a space with the sound, which is granular and it is very surrounding, and you are really surrounded with it. And you really cannot see this particulars. So for me, it was very important to have a part of performativity, and because we are also the performing bodies in the exhibition, experience the sound, experiencing the architecture from different perspectives, this sometimes very silent gestures, sometimes very dominant gestures. The idea was to have a moment how we can have another level, and that was the digital space, which Nikola and brought to us, which I was very happy, and I recognize how they are a part of also the choreography. So it was not for me clear how we develop another level of visualization, and how the dramaturgy, which Nikola brought, and the performative, which Damir brought to us, was very mind-opening, and on the search of the new forms and the new visualities, which are not so dominant and very color or body or contextually based. So it was for me a very undisciplinary moment of bringing all the elements together in an exhibition, which was kind of also a milestone in the history of the institution, because the institution has been a space for, in German, we say two-dimensional presentations. And so the dimension is always a idea, like how you can not think about the 3-dimension, but when you lose the dimension. And the dimensions means also the time and space and the parameters. So how can we play in between these parameters? How can we develop new parameters? For me, it was very important to see an exhibition in very different parameters. The same exhibition, how can you develop with another parameter? Can you read an exhibition or be a part of an exhibition from different parameters? So I think the spatial typology idea, which both of you brought to us, is actually revolutionary for me, to think about not doing this 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional moments in the exhibition making, but also kind of bringing the spatial data into another form, and how to find this form through the sound and through the performativity. So I think these methodologies, which interest me as a curator and as an institution, how we can enable these moments of the research, what I think, which is very important to see also the exhibition making and the art works, also a long-term process, how we can approach to this team through an exhibition, which we have been developing the last 2 years, I would say. and bringing this digital extension with a very unstable data, which we don't know if we can really involve the audience during the exhibition and the live transmission, which was for me a very important moment, because when you are in an exhibition, what makes us very spectacular is the experience, live experience you have in that moment, specifically in that space. And how you can develop it and make it kind of a unique experience when you don't have these parameters. You are live and you see yourself in another digital moment, choreographed by someone other. So you become one image as the sound particles itself, which you normally don't see, and in the interpretation or in the other level, in the other universe of the digital data, you become, but with different colors or with different movements. Like this search for me is very important, and I believe that in the world of the VR, which is everything is very really connected to the reality and the color and the image making itself, to find this avant-garde moments of image making is making this moment very precious as a creator. So that would be from my side.
Well, thank you all three so much. I think it was super important to show that video, also especially for Sergey and Linz to get an impression of the exhibition. Unfortunately, you guys have not been able to see the show. What we found out already and what Jan, Nikola, and Chala described, there are several layers to the exhibition. It's not only the exhibition in a physical form, but it's, of course, accompanied, like you could almost say traditionally, by an artist book or by a catalog, which, but in this case, in our perception, adds a different layer because it's how do you say, designed specifically and consisting of several inputs from researchers, scientists, and also collaborators of Jan's. And then there, of course, has been a performance program starting from the beginning of the exhibition, which was quite extensive for the Kunsthalle. Almost every 2 weeks, we hosted guests of ours performing as well in the Kunsthalle, giving lectures and partaking in talks with the curators and the artists, but also performances that went outside of the Kunsthalle and almost in, I won't say attacked, but somehow really religiously walked through Baden-Baden and the park that is in front of our institution. And then there is, of course, the syntheticspace.de platform, which Linz, Sergey, and most of all, of course, Gamba are now going to talk about. And I think Gamba is then showing something of the recordings that we did during one of those performance weekends, in order for everybody now to get an impression of what this visualization, which is not purely only a visualization, but those aesthetic second layer is looking like. And to then join and start off the second part of this full event, I'd like to introduce our next three speakers, and starting off with Linz Derry. She's an artist and designer working in the domains of human-computer interaction, data communication, and choreography. The body is often her site for investigation and intervention in the realms of design and performance. And her current work explores how choreographic interfaces can increase the kinetic and spatial interactivity between humans and technological systems. So in addition, she researches how scientific data sets can inspire humanitarian responses via a performative process that she calls data embodiment. Presently, she's a principal at MetaLab at Harvard, an experimental arts, humanities, and design lab comprising of scholars, designers, artists, and technologists. With MetaLab, she researches how choreographic interfaces and data embodiment can be developed for both functional and aesthetic ends. In 2020, Derry graduated with distinction from the MDES technology program at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And prior to this, she performed professionally with dance companies based in New York, San Francisco, Montreal, including Hope More Dance and Jose Navas' company FLAC, if I pronounced that correctly. Touring across North America, Europe, and Asia Highlights included dancing at the Guggenheim Museum Bilbao and the Oslo Opera House. Goran Sergei Pristash is a dramaturg and co-founder as well as member of Bad Company, I believe that is, right? A performing arts collective. From 1995 till 27, right? He was a researcher and curator at the Center for Drama Art, the CDU, and is currently associate professor of dramaturgy at the Academy of Dramatic Arts at the University of Zagreb. Pristash is one of the initiators of the project Zagreb Cultural Capital of Europe 3000. And with his projects and collaborations, he participated at the Venice Biennale in 2011 and 2016, at Documenta 12, ARCO, and numerous other festivals and conferences. He mentored and taught at DOCH in Stockholm, the JLU in Gießen, Statens Scenekunstskole in Copenhagen, Parts in Brussels, and more. He teaches courses in performance dramaturgy, writing for performance, analytical writing, dramaturgy and choreography, collaborative practices, etc., and was the first editor-in-chief of Fragestellungen, a magazine for the performing arts. I hope I didn't pronounce that absolutely wrong. Damir Gamulin, as we call Gamba, is a designer and researcher with a background in design studies at the Faculty of Architecture, also the University of Zagreb. Integral to his overall practice are projects based on design research. These include graphic, interior, and architectural design, museum and exhibition setups, as well as digital and interactive design. This versatility has garnered numerous awards, and Gamolin's work has been featured in prestigious international institutions and various regional exhibitions. Intrigued by the intersection of technology, disciplines, and scales, Gamulin contributes to spatial design projects that explore the relationship between space and knowledge. Independently and in collaborations, Gamulin consistently seeks to develop innovative methods and digital tools for the integrated formatting, editing, and interpretation of physical and conceptual content, continually testing the limits of his craft. A very warm welcome to all three of you. Gamba, I'm handing over to you. It's a pleasure to host you all.
Hello, hello all. Okay, let me try to continue on the nice presentation that you heard prior. I believe that we also need to show you some of the specifics of how this recording took place. What were the key things that kind of motivated this approach, but also what were the key let's say, methodological and structural principles that we insisted on utilizing, because you can document digitally exhibition in also many ways. So reducing to something that we thought would be appropriate for Kunsthalle, but even a bit more to the sound, or the genesis of the sound and the spatial thinking that Jan brought to us in all these talks many months ago. Can I share? Let's see.
Yes, you can. I think so.
Very good. I'll just you see the screen? Everything gray, just one text. Very good. It's always good to test. So some things were mentioned before, and I would like to kind of lead you through the thinking. Obviously, this is on many occasions before it was mentioned that this is a choreographed documentation. We'll try to elaborate why we see that as such. Obviously, this new layer of existing exhibition, it's always interesting. Well, let's say question to answer, but obviously we need to answer it appropriately for this specific exhibition. When we discuss this digitality or this recreation of the physical space in something digital, there are many possible approaches. One thing that I think they were kind of in everybody's mind initially is maybe a bit more objective recording. So I would like to start with the comparison, because this is, for example, this is Alex Clocom from the Unreal game engine presenting or testing on the next stage this year. This would be what I would describe as an objective digital spatial recording. And what you see here is the abundance of sensors and let's say the very, very high preciseness of data that's being captured. What we also see here that this is totally incompatible with any kind of artistic work, because this overtakes the exhibition. This cannot be done live without being a high interruption of the space itself. So we want to move beyond this objective spatial record, and the approach that was taken wanted to acknowledge personal path, or that was directly me going through the exhibition space, deciding on a moment where to find a topic that we're going to focus, what's the decided viewpoint, when to change it. Obviously, well, you've seen the space before. Limitations, even the biggest or the best sensors that I came across are the ones that we would need to overcrowd this space with sensors to get any sort of data if we want to capture it objectively. So the idea was to introduce the choreographed documentation, meaning we reduce it to a performance choice, and that would mean that we need to tailor it to the specific exhibition space, but even more to the specific dynamics. From dynamics are navigated by the ambience itself, by the sound, by the visitors, and so pretty much every recording is kind of unique. It's almost impossible to repeat the recording twice. So if we want to use this in this method, if we want to use this handheld scanner, it obviously needs to become this extension of the body, and that would kind of make it more than a recording device. It should interact with the exhibition. It should adapt on the way, and kind of open and construct, record and construct in real time. This trajectory of recording is obviously not arbitrary. It's being influenced by all these factors, but also by the reaction of the scanner itself. This being a device of, let's say, limited quality, that even provides us with better opportunities for recreation. So what you see here is what is being, how it would look if I recorded it with a real camera. You need to find a proper space where planes of the exhibition or the exhibition elements overlap, and kind of make the problem for the sensor itself. So this some kind of non-existent data is being recorded, as well as the as the one that we really have, meaning that during recording we synthesize the space. Sorry. What you see here is the same speaker in front, recorded during that movement from the slide before. Meaning, with this movement and finding similar geometries, we're messing with the sensor and the applications algorithm, and thus we are creating this extents of the real objects. This is the speaker from the side. The same will obviously happen on the wall behind where the door is, where we kind of break it with visitors or with performers. But with this kind of recording, we were capable of seeing this as a, let's say, a data construct or a new spatial construct that is wider than the event itself that happened. During the recording, obviously, it must be in a flow. This is the part where I think it's the closest to the idea of choreography, meaning during the recording, in some tests, I figured out that it's not good when we just change from one viewpoint of interest to the another, because it breaks the flow of the exhibit. It breaks the flow of the viewing, meaning that when we go through this space, we need to remain on one topic as long as it's possible, as long as it's necessary that to prepare the recording, the sensor, and the rhythm to the next topic, and then just jump and try to make another firm point or steady point in space. So this change of position is guided by the sensor's response, by the sound itself, and any other things that you can't plan in advance. So we are constantly waiting for the exhibition space to fluctuate in front of us, and we are free to remain on the same spot until we're ready, or the exhibitions kind of ask us to go on further on. So one other key thing that we think that it was important in this kind of recording is that while during the recording, it needs to be recorded at the very end of the sensor limit, because that's the place where we create these confabulations or non-existing reconstructions or constructions of space. But we can also enhance that, meaning during the recording, we can shrink or enlarge sensor sensitivity, meaning from the same recording spot, and through that include or exclude parts of the exhibition in a shot. So then during this kind of recording, we now get our data, but still this being a heavy data load, it's pretty much stuck to the sensor or the device itself. We needed to find a way how to make this first recordable, but also manageable. So with our developer Bruno Bojić, we devised and designed and blah blah something a local application that's capable of capturing this depth data and define it visually, meaning the depth resolution, coloring, spatial positioning or something, and reconstruct it as a completely new spatial construct. We are now capable of running up to 4 different spatial inputs that can be blended into one new setup. As mentioned before, this is highly unstable recording or like unstable remediation, but I would say that this is the best part of the process, because it creates new opportunities for reinterpretation, not being just a plain copy of the physical experience that we have on our own. And we need to definitely look for on that beyond representation, because we need to find a way how to create new constructs that will build new knowledge, but also something that we discussed, maybe use as a transferring tool of one exhibition to a completely different gallery, different country, different continent. And this was the flow that we were thinking, where we have a gallery space with its own specifics. We have this nicely developed, designed, and curated exhibition, and we have all these inputs that were kind of all our joint talks on the topic, where we needed to that were all part of this input for this final new digital reconstruction at the end. What I discussed now was this central part where we developed this choreographed the choreographed recording or documenting, but this needs to be public. This becomes public through various layers of streaming, and then building on the synthetic space platform in the end that wants to cover not only this visual part, but the theoretical, methodological, especially since I believe that this visual approach was appropriate for as an answer for Jan's work in his Kunsthalle, but this is totally open to be in visually completely different, just utilizing the same steps. The reconstruction is done in some different way, but I believe this would open new possibilities, and obviously this was something that we all wanted to discuss today. And at the end, I would like to just show you just the beginning of this recording of the performance that was done within the space, where Jan brought various performances that did some version of these movable spatial speakers blended within the exhibition space, partly something that we were introduced in Zagreb also.
Okay, sorry.
So just a glance of it, because it takes half an hour to. It would totally be too long, but we have it for anybody who's interested. That was me.
Thank you, Gamba. So we should maybe move to the unfoldings or potential another scenarios or perspectives on this conversation of the space that we just saw. This is space that used to be tectonically stable, space that exhibition space that you saw previously at the beginning of our conversation, that turned into exploded unstable entity that meshes human bodies and architecture, entity that is wild, that is data heavy load, space that actually opens up and that is rendered through unstable or exploded viewpoints of the person who are recording or choreographing the space, but also those from the position of those who are moving in the space. So I would like to hear Sergey, who is dramaturg and also author of the book The Exploded Gaze, which deals with politics of seeing in the context of dramaturgy and the scene and performance as well. So I would like to hear your perspective and potentially some interesting terrains that might be opened up here and developed further from your position. We cannot hear you, Sergey, for some reason. No? Are you all?
Now camera is gone, sound is gone.
No. Unfortunately, for some reason. Okay.
Okay, as I understand him, he's going to rejoin. Maybe we can
switch to Linz and wait for what do you think, Dominic? Okay, cool, Sergey. So we are switching while waiting for Sergey's setup. We are switching to Linz Derry, who is artist and researcher working currently at Harvard Meta Lab. And Linz, you're dealing with the notion of embodied data. And I think that there are several interesting and potentially very fruitful overlaps between what we are trying to develop here and open up here, and your practice and also theoretical and methodological research. Can you maybe tell us more about your research and your perspectives on what body and embodied data means, or body immersed in spatial data can mean in future?
Absolutely. Well, to begin, thank you for welcoming me to this conversation. It has been a pleasure to learn about both projects and clearly their interconnectedness. Have so many thoughts to share, but we'll begin with your prompt to let everyone know a little bit about what I do and maybe the reason for the invitation from that. My background is in contemporary dance, performance, and choreography. And I've been pulling on two threads since graduating from the Graduate School of Design, same program as Nikola in Master in Design Studies. The first one is choreographic interfaces, thinking about how our interfaces with computers, namely, choreograph the body, and how they also create entry points for choreographed movement to then enter our computational systems. And a related project would be at the Harvard Art Museums in their experimental space. MetaLab curated a show that looked at how AI relates to curatorial practice, and that produced a handful of projects that were web-based that then took the Harvard Art Museum's digital collections and reworked them with this curatorial, I guess, this AI's hand in curatorial process. And the way I brought choreographic interfaces into the exhibition was to use a very set vocabulary to then interact with these web-based projects, such as using hands to shoulders for zoom in, hands to the side for zoom out. And this was done with just a simple webcam and some weaving together of different machine learning models to accomplish this. And then the other thread I am pulling on is this idea of data embodiment, really from a choreographic perspective, toying with maybe changing it to the term data kinesthetics, because I'm interested in thinking about how abstract data can be physicalized and performed through the body in order to make data more aesthetic, more communicative, put on stage. So it's not only something that is experienced, but is something that can be read in a different register that is in addition to the sight through visualization or the ears for sonification and so forth. We'll kind of just circle on a few reflections here. One simple question listening to the reflection so far, just what is choreography in this context? And I like to think of choreography as something that can be, or can think of choreography models. I'm sure Sergey will have a perspective on this too, but from my own experience as a dancer for a few decades, is that choreography models can be found within the body, movement models, whether they're specific vocabularies or ideas that maybe spin up through metaphors, conceptual layers. Actually, I'm sorry, that's the next one. Thinking choreography models that pertain to the movement and the body, choreography models that pertain on the cognitive level, these conceptual ideas, the way we can use metaphors to create movement ideas out in space. And then also we have choreography models that relate to sound, to architectural space. But all this is to say is that we got a lot going on here with these projects. We have the way choreography is both sequenced and emergent in the way that Jan talked about the body going through the different rooms in a specific sequence, but then it's also very emergent in where a person chooses to stand in a space. So the choreography is becoming, it is unfolding along with the sound, along with the light in the architectural space. I really like that. And then just thinking about where is choreography in Damir's presentation. It's also in the way that the scanner is being held and moved, as he very clearly articulated, as the person's moving. So there's this dialogue in both of that. And then this makes me think about then kind of jumping off of that, which is whose knowledge are we actually visualizing? Are we visualizing the knowledge of the scanner? Are we visualizing our interpretation of this mediation, of the data that's being produced from the mover? And the question of whose knowledge are we visualizing comes in the design choices we make, like in the way that point clouds emerge visually. So that's an interesting kind of question to kind of put out there, maybe with this question of like what next or how to expand this work. And yeah, maybe we'll just hit a pause there. I know we want to kind of talk a little bit more about embodied data to the prompt here, but I'll let anyone jump in, but I can also kind of take it further, thinking about what it means to embody data in this particular context, or what it means for that data to flow through the body to produce these visualizations or to produce the actual artwork in the exhibition. And there's a lot there, as well as kind of have some thoughts on the political nature of what that means to be debased. Love that term and framing. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Liz. Absolutely fantastic feedback and questions, and I think they summed up really nicely the base of the further jumpings in potentially much broader research. But right now, maybe Sergey can jump into discussion. Are we? Can you hear us? Can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Fantastic,
okay.
Man. Great.
Good.
Okay, I think this is a great point to just jump in, huh?
Yeah, sorry for this interruption. I don't know what happened. Yeah, I somehow blended out from the sound. So, but I think it's great that Linz was just talking before I took part in the discussion, because she actually said something that was on my mind, and one of the things that should be invested in the research, further research, is actually what do we mean by choreography when we are talking about what is done by body and in relation to other bodies or the space itself. Therefore, I will not go into that direction so much as I would be interested to understand what are we talking when we are talking about the gaze, and specifically here about the gaze that demands a kind of additional thinking, almost a kind of responsibility for what was seen. I was quite struck when I had seen for the first time when Gamba had shown me how the thing works. And I would say that okay, if we understand what Gamba wanted to say with beyond the representation as one further step in the continuum of critique of representation and a kind of fight against the representation, then we necessarily have to go back to Roland Barthes and his question of how do we basically dissolve the problem of representation, or is it possible to dissolve the problem of triangle which is created by the point of view? And if we look into relation between choreography, gaze, and representation, necessarily the history of a critique of representation was a kind of choreography through the points of view, through different perspectives. And what Roland Barthes proposes is something that is very similar to what I was struck by when I had seen the outcome of the usage of synthetic space. And that's the fact that I confronted the gaze of the undead in the same way as Roland Barthes wanted to describe that the only point of going beyond the representation is to see with the eyes of the undead one. And he uses the example from Dreyer's movie, Vampire. There is a scene when they take the vampire in a coffin through the space, and there is a window in the coffin, and we see the face of the vampire with his eyelids closed, but there is a cut to subjective view of the vampire who sees the trees which are above the coffin, and he moves with that subjective gaze through the space. So that gaze is what Roland Barthes calls the moment of going beyond the representation, impossible gaze, basically. And therefore, I would use the metaphor of the exploded view here. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of exploded view. That's the technical term for what we get once we buy the new furniture in IKEA or wherever. So beside the manual, we also get that sketch which creates an illusion of a small controlled explosion and the center of the object that we bought. So the result of that small explosion is that its integral parts are frozen in mid-air, scattered in space. So we see the whole object, but somehow scattered in space and almost at an equal distance from each other. But what I find interesting in that idea of the gaze is that, of the view, is that we can turn it also into a metaphor of gaze and talk about a kind of diagrammatic refractional view, mode of representation that somehow in synchronicity shows an exploded view of diachronic processes. So seeing the image which is merged from two different points of view, which can show the things which are not only not visible to us, but also the things which are not there actually, but are results of the triggering of the sensors or the faking of the data. This produces something that I would call here exploded gaze. So exploded gaze is a gaze that, in a way, I would say, looks through closed eyes. Remember the eyes of the undead one. So the eyes whose pupils are faced with a rupture, with an interstice, and have a kind of exploded view of the problem space. So the space that we were discussing here is a kind of problem space where which somehow represents the field of problematics of the sound, of the architecture, but it is in the same time the space of the apparatus. And that gaze is the gaze that attends the operator. Going back to the metaphor of the camera, it's the gaze that attends the operator while he's or she's operating her camera optics, and not when she examines the negatives at the moment when the apparatus is being negotiated. And this is a kind of inhuman gaze, and it explodes into a gaze that is the view from the point of matter, of the point of apparatus itself. That's why I'm interested in this gaze, exactly because the image that emerges makes the world withdraw. And to occupy this place where through data facts retreat into, where the effects retreat into irrelevance, where what is left in the void becomes visible through the smoke which follows that explosion, this smoke of the lines, means to be in a kind of density of composites of sound, space, data, etc. And therefore, this kind of image needs another kind of responsibility when we discuss what does the image embody, what is the world that withdraws, and what are the new field of interests which open up with these problematics. But since we are much beyond time, I will cut down here and open the space for a further discussion, because we are already, as much as I see, in the undead time.
Thank you so much, Sergey. I mean, this responsibility, actually, that you just mentioned, responsibility of a view and actually gaze, actually brings us back to something that Linz pointed out, which is whose knowledge is captured there, or who creates, who articulates the knowledge. It seems to me from this conversation that knowledge is being constantly negotiated, or knowledge production, or this position to construct knowledge through representation is constantly being negotiated between the one who holds the camera or the sensor, the algorithm itself, the architecture, and people around walking randomly. So this new space, I think, opens up to a new politics of production of knowledge, spatial knowledge. So maybe Linz could do interesting feedback on that, actually.
Oh, yes, entirely. Thank you. Glad this idea is fruitful. Was thinking again from this idea of data embodiment, like with this awareness that the performer who is moving through the space, I mean, in many ways, it feels like the sensor itself as is also an inhuman performer in this moment, because it's creating a duet and a tension between the humans in the space and our synthetic space. But there's choices that could be made. Like once the awareness, maybe thinking if I were in the space performing with the sensor, it seems like quick movements maybe would throw the sensor off and maybe would create an absence of data. And that kind of can play with the politics of what it means to be tracked and making choices about maybe I don't want my fast, or maybe certain movements I would choose to obscure the ability to be tracked and measured, and can use speed as a method of shaping the data that is then transmitted, that is then produced into this idea or this layer of knowledge and so forth. So just kind of riffing off this idea of just like how being in the hotspot as a performer could make choices about my data in this space and in the synthetic space as well. I'll pause there and pass it back.
Thank you. Maybe Jan or Chala or Damir can respond to this.
Yeah, there are so many really interesting points to connect actually, and to refer to. What I find really interesting is that we are kind of free floating between ideas of, you could say, tools, the sensor as an instrument, the sensor as a body extension, but also the sensor as an alien, you could say, object. So as much as
a vampire, as Sergei said, vampire.
A vampire, but the interesting thing is the moment you realize that this tool is an extension, is an external extension of your senses, or it is a helping force, somehow an object in its own right, there is a detachment, and this detachment creates a certain awareness. It creates a position towards this extension, and again you create a space within your space creating setup of tools. And I find this very interesting, that wherever you are within this system of, let's say, the physical, you're tempted to say the real space, but the navigation between this space, the digital space, the imaginative space, the cognitive continuous construction of where am I in relation to that space that seems to exist around me, that this navigation is the actual challenge and construction. And I'm just saying that I find it striking that within all these explanations, whether it is a physical choreography related to the art of dance, or what Sergei was describing, or what we have upstairs with sound traveling through the space, there is a constant navigational negotiation between the elements we can become aware of and the elements we intuitively use, including our own body and the different aspects we use to construct that body. So there was an observation.
If I could just add on, when we were doing the tests or the tryouts before, I would say that it was clearly obvious that some spatial translations or some spatial combinations don't blend well as a sequence or a spatial sequence or a visual sequence, and we need to devise a sort of inflow transition to be able to deal with various spatial aspects of your exhibition. Meaning, especially you were talking earlier on this peeled off corner, which is very peculiar, the space with just a small detailing And I figured out that the only way how to deal with that is by not moving, just by changing this sensor sensitivity. That way I could peel off the sensor data the way how you peeled off the space. And one other thing, that particular part of the exhibit requires during the recording to keep a pretty static position to make it legible up to any desired level. So I figured out that we need some very abrupt, almost violent jumps to go from that to anything further. Also, one other thing, while these tests were being done, not a single good recording was made. The only few recordings I have on a computer were done in a single flow after all these tests, just pretty much trying to forget that there is a sensor in a hand, just to move and to flow with it and stop if I feel that there was no rhythm within the recording, and go back and start again. So these tests were necessary to analyze and understand the spatial qualities, but the flow itself, it needed to be, I would say, 100% intuitive, and pump it as the ambience navigates you and how sensor allows you.
So basically, this is notion of navigation as dramaturgy, or transitions that are used, physical transitions that are used, sensor transitions that are used as the gesture, as a dramatic gesture. So yes. Sergey raised his hand, and also Chala.
Thank you. When I see something like the recording of which Gamba had shown to us, I always like to ask myself, okay, what would somebody in 100 years or in 1,000 years, if they find it, how they would reconstruct the situation in which it was recorded? And at this point of view, the only position to which I could dedicate this gaze is the curator's position, the position of one who is creating conditions of watching and conditions of interpretation of the work. And that's the gaze from a side, very classical Brechtian type of gaze, the gaze from the point of view where you can see how the work works, not how the work produces meaning, but how the work internally works. And when I say work, this implicates always also a spectator, not only the one who is taking the position of an artist or a producer or whatever you want to call it. Therefore, I find it very much related to the question of social choreography of gaze, because what we get from the movement of the spectator is basically kind of Tourette syndrome. We cannot talk about reflected choreography, something that in a way that Lynn described it through a kind of modulation or formal idea of what the choreography is writing with the bodies or within the bodies or between the bodies would be. So choreography is not something that happens only on the body, but also that happens between the body's objects and ideas. It has much more diagrammatic character. This is another diagram that we get, and this diagram has data which is basically hidden from the view of those who are producing it and those who are watching it, and which is curated. And where I say that there is a point of responsibility, that's exactly where I would like to locate it, at the position of the one who connects the apparatus to the one who produces and the one who observes.
Chala, you had a feedback prepared.
Actually, I really wanted to share one diagram what Damir has produced. Like, I don't know if you have it, but it's kind of a blossoming flower with data feed visualization. If you can find it and share with us, I would be glad.
The one, I'm not sure.
The spiral one.
Yes, the spiral one. Yes, just a second, please.
And I can, in the meantime, I can just comment on 3 very important things which I wanted to speak about. But in the meantime, Sergey developed also the gaze of the creator. I want to comment at the end to that. I think it was very important for me, this new connection with the vocabulary, which then you have introduced also in your speech to us at the beginning, and the choreography as an interface, to see the choreography as an interface and to develop these vocabulary, the interface. I think this is the, this brings also what you have questioned, who is making the choreography and for whom is this the choreography? I think these questioning is very interesting to dig for further communications or further collaborations, like how to develop these models that we have been developing during the performativity. And I was really very interested in taking the absence as a new form of this interface, because also bodies moving or the sound moving or the exhibition space also a part of this interface, but they all live with the absence. Like when you build a wall and you see the there is no door, and this absent door becomes a metaphorical approach of the speakers in the whole exhibition upstairs. So the absence of the door in the space it has to be, and this was used already by the data collection and the performativity by Damir. So there was already the absence, and to use the absence of the absence, so negative of the negativity, and use this as a choreography. I think it's so interesting to continue on that, not only also on the metaphorical level, but also on the aesthetical level. So it opened really important things in my mind, because as an institution, as a creator, institution maker and a creator, we have to develop new forms and to start something, and how can we move on? It doesn't need to be a next exhibition, but a conversation which starts with this, and to take it from the, as you see in the incredible clear diagram, like the gallery space, sound and light and installation, and then you have the soundscapes and the ideascapes, and these two lead to the synthetic space platform. I think for me it's very important to connect to the platform. Who does the platform also, like which choreographies, which protagonists, artists, creators, collaborators. So these multi-channel opening, I think very interesting to connect and to move on. So that would be my comment too now.
Nikola?
Are there any?
May I just comment one thing? When we were working on these diagrams, Nikola was much more in favor of this one than the other one seen before. I would say that mainly this diagram obviously shows some linear procedure of steps, but as an organization, it's not. Organizationally, it's not linear, so things can be seen in neighborhoods of actions without its now defined linearity of steps.
For me personally, this one is less positivist, is less certain, because in this spiral form, you lose a bit of this linear systemic connections.
Yes.
You know, things get into each other, things or entities or phenomena needs to negotiate and create actually new entities, new type of emerging typologies in space. Something maybe we should
May I just add just small thing, please? We are totally on board with that, but during the discussion with Bruno, our developer, the first diagram was for him as somebody who needed to create some real steps and flow of technologies was clear enough. So since this kind of work doesn't work if we exclude various disciplines, and we rely on the people that expand us, and this is totally collaborative. You understand what I want. And so Bruno preferred this one, and we worked on that as an organizational tool. Obviously, we used this one for our further talk.
I love them both. Just wanted to add this one comment on.
I think, go on, sorry.
Oh, sure. The first one, I felt that remediation column made it very clear in terms of where the body is in the diagram. Like, this is where the body is. And the other one's a bit more conceptual and complex. Like the body maybe is everywhere, but in its versions of flesh and digital. But just wanted to offer that. But beautiful, and as you put, Damir, maybe great for different purposes and 2 different workflows.
Yes.
So I mean, thanks for sharing the on diagram. Actually, I think the whole group is pretty much diagrammatic group or diagram oriented. I guess, and most of our conversations are being sketched in diagrams of some kind, which are not necessarily systemic but anti-systemic diagrams. Chala, maybe you raised your hand. Unmute.
I just wanted to ask Sergey, after I couldn't come to the curatorial gaze, but since you are also a dramaturg, and your feedback between the spaces is for me very important, because you were also talking about the interface, but I think it came a bit too short. Maybe you can open up from there to hear a bit more about the vocabulary and the interface.
Yeah, thank you for asking this. That's a thing that I tried to explain in my book, Exploded Gaze, actually, to think how we can rethink the modalities of relating to the ways how we come together, how we document things, and how we use our mentality of documenting or documentality in favor of producing some other logic of traces, which would, in a way, question the logics of archiving the things for the sake of interpretation. One of these attempts was in 2011. It was mentioned in the introduction, the exhibition that we had curated by WHW in Venice Biennial, where we also worked on a digital, it was called algorithmic live digital video editing system. And there we tried to produce a documentation of the watching of something that was a promise of a pavilion. So that there was no act of performing, but a moment of encounter with the fact that the performance itself is displaced, and what we are dealing here with is a logic of embodying curatorial position of producing a performance by other means. And these other means were the means of speculation and watching. And now seeing this actually in much more synthetic and much more user-friendly way, I would say, somehow this synthetic spaces coagulates all the problematics, all the problem fields and regimes of interest that we tried to set up there, but in much more, I would say, aesthetically challenging way. So we wanted to work there with something that would remind aesthetics of the 70s structuralist cinema. Here, with this digital modality of representation, we get some extra on something that is not there, which produces means for speculation. And that's why what I liked also about your emphasis on the point of thinking about the double negation, absence of the absent, which is immanently theatrical, because we always try to do that thing. We try to by something that disclaims itself represent something that is not there anyway. So yeah, I don't know if I made it more clear, but
if I might continue with the second question, because it came also very interesting in Lynn's conversation about the absence, which made me think about this absence of the absence and the double negotiation. So, and you were just about to a bit talk about new methodologies of doing the choreography, and I was very into also how you define the awareness of the choreography. Maybe you tell a bit about from your experiences, from your former projects, how you have developed this in your practice.
Terrific. Well, it's actually maybe a bit more my creative response and something I'm hoping to do next, which is when working with the data set, there's always the analysis that needs to take place, which is what isn't being measured. So there's always going to be a layer of absence in data sets themselves. And that's an important question to ask when embarking with a new data set that maybe a designer wants to visualize, or in my case, a data set that I would want to choreograph. So data sets are inherently political in that they make decisions about what to measure. So they're not truly objective in all the knowledge that they are portraying. Hence kind of coming back to these ideas of whose knowledge is being portrayed, and then in that knowledge production phase or representation of that knowledge, there becomes design choices and outputs. So a lot in there. And from a practice standpoint, been thinking about data embodiment from these two stances. One is to get a data set and work from there. But then there's also this idea of, by moving in a space, for instance, with this depth sensing device, I'm also producing a data set through the movement that I'm making. And then how do I want to tweak that data set in real time? And that's for this idea of just in my observation of, if I move really quickly, then I can create an absence of ideas in that data set, or an absence of vocabulary, measurable variables in the data set, if I should so choose. And do want to put forth, there's this idea of tracking being related to surveillance, and surveillance as having this dubious quality. But I think thinking of tracking, yes, that data maybe could be used to, anyway, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but do want to say that I don't think tracking is inherently bad, right, to use technologies to track the bodies. It's just, it's a topic that we're exploring, I think, here on this platform in this moment. So one example of people who have worked with absence would be, let me grab a name really quick here. I don't want to. Okay, so Molly Roy, a filmmaker, George Cermini, did a project One True False Move, and they played with changing ideas of data with AI doing behavioral movement analysis by she performed the movements that would be perceived as bad, like apparent movements of tripping or falling, or movements that would alarm a behavior algorithm. And that was her way of shifting the data set. And then another quick example is Harris Kornstein wrote on drag as obfuscation, talking about drag queens on Facebook, maybe through, like, for instance, the makeup techniques of drag created, shifted the data as it was perceived by facial analytics or facial analysis algorithms, where tagging was happening unsuccessfully on drag queens content on Facebook. So those are just like two quick examples of how, like, data that we're performing, and as we're producing it, how these performative methodologies can actually change the data sets. And I find that that is a really interesting thing to think about, especially in this context of we're talking about data that's being produced in real time. And of course, in a very friendly manner of tracking that is done with consent and debased. Yay.
Hey, Dominic, maybe you should be the next, since we reached 6 p.m.
Yes.
And first, Liz, thank you so much for the feedback. I think just a word from me before giving it to Dominic. Thank you so much. This was really amazing. And I think this is just a start of conversation and potentially several projects that can emerge out of this conversation. And because synthetic space is not a project that is finished, synthetic space is a platform. We observe it as a platform that should be developed, that should emerge from this type of encounters, and not just the digital or virtual, but also potentially, hopefully, physical encounters. Because as we all saw today, this data that we're talking about is deeply human based. This synthetic space is flesh and bones, moving bodies, concrete walls. It's not just algorithms and AI models doing their thing somewhere in their black boxes. It's also flesh and bones. It's also concrete. It's also dusty data and dusty lands beneath our feet. So this is the idea of new type of synthetic space that we are trying to develop, with all interesting points, theoretical, cultural, humanities, and speculative positions that you brought up. Thank you so much. This will be a public video, and hopefully we'll reconnect rather soon in maybe around next initiative. So thank you. Dominic, maybe it's your turn.
It's just a few adding words, actually, because what you just said last, there's so much more to come to synthetic space. It's institutional dimension we have barely touched, basically. And I hope we get together in this constellation at a later point. There's so many open things, I think, worth continuing to talk about, like Lynn's moment where she introduced something like an activist practice to escape censors and counter-activism. There is so much in it still to be discussed, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this round. Maybe it's possible for us to rejoin at, I don't know, like half a year, we'll see. So also from me, warmly, thank you very much, everybody involved. Thank you so much for joining. Jan Werner, Tala Ilk, Nikola Bojić, Damir, Gamulin, Sergei Pristash, Linz Derry, all of you, thank you very much. I enjoyed listening to you guys. This video, as Nikola said, is going to be on our YouTube account, so everybody's able to rewatch. And people who have been joining us and watching us, hope to welcome you on July 14th for the opening of our next 2 exhibitions. It's going to be some kind of a summer celebration starting in the morning and lasting until very late at night. And yeah, hope to see you all soon. Have a nice Sunday.
Thank you. Bye.
Let's all open our microphones and make just a final collective